Hey there, welcome back to another video. This time around, it is my review of the 1998 Nickelodeon animated film, The Rugrats Movie. Now, surprisingly enough, this was a film that even when I was a kid, I wasn't really a big fan of. And I was actually the demographic for this movie because I grew up with Rugrats, the TV show. It was one of my most watched cartoons as a kid. So I should have been in love with the movie, but I really wasn't. I liked the soundtrack more than I liked the movie itself. In fact, I remember liking Rugrats in Paris a lot more now that I think about it. Because I don't know, this just didn't appeal to me as much as the show did. It felt like it was more serious than the show was, and it just felt off to me, and I didn't like Dill, and I still don't like Dill. And it was just one of those films where there were some things about it that I enjoyed as a kid, but not to the extent where it was something that I would consider to be one of my favorites or something I have that much nostalgia for. And in all honesty, the show itself hasn't really held up that well for me either. Rugrats is a franchise and a cartoon that as an adult, I just don't really enjoy or like as much as I enjoyed it as a kid. And the film is a prime example of that because I didn't really care for this movie. I mean, I didn't like it as a kid, and I still don't like it as an adult. It's just not for me. But before I get around to sharing more of my thoughts on the film, though, I would like to give a special shout out to Ryan for requesting this review. And if there is another film, TV show, or topic that you would like to see me discuss in the future, feel free to donate to either my PayPal, my Patreon, or my Cash App. The links to all three are in the video description down below, and I will try to get to your requests as soon as I possibly can. Now, the Rugrats movie is directed by Norton Virgien and Igor Kovalyov, and I believe these are two directors who worked on the show. So I think that definitely does help the film in terms of it having a continuity and not really having this approach of some kind of total outsider directing the Rugrats feature film debut. But it does lead to some moments though where the film kind of looks like the TV show, but there are some moments where it has a cinematic feel to it, and there's actually quite a few moments like that. So I don't think it's really something that looks like it's just a TV movie. But I do feel that the familiarity with the property definitely leads to less risks being taken visually. So that might have been interesting to have seen a different approach in that regard. But there still are some really genuinely nice looking shots in this. The Indiana Jones parody that opens and ends the movie is well shot and well framed. Some of the other sequences involving the Reptar wagon are well done. Um, there are some moments where the film gets pretty dramatic and dark, where the direction reflects that surprisingly well. Uh, it's not a film though where the direction is incredibly dynamic or amazing, but it's not like it's a bit of directing where the two directors soil themselves either. Like, it's the kind of movie where you got a couple directors who worked on the show, who are have experience with classical and they wind up turning in a decent, adequate product. And it's an all right job by the two of them. The best it gets is when it comes to moments involving the babies in the Reptar wagon, getting involved in some sort of chase, or some of the more fantastical scenes, the fantasy sequences. Uh, the other sequences that don't really deal with a lot of that kind of look a little flat, especially some of the scenes with a lot of the other side characters, or when it's going back to the parents trying to find the kids. So, yeah, it's not a film that I would say visually is super strong when it comes to its direction, but it works. It's effective enough for the kind of film that the Rugrats movie ultimately is. The screenplay is by David N. Weiss and J. David Stem. And the script, in my opinion, is the biggest problem I have with this entire movie. I don't mind the idea of the babies going on an adventure, being stuck in the woods, and having to find a way to survive. That's not necessarily the problem I have with it. The problem I have is the tone. It's just surprisingly dark and a little too serious for what the show was. So it feels like it's somebody's vision of the show, but not a vision that matches what the show actually is. And I'm not the only person because that feels that way, because one of the original writers and co-creators of Rugrats, Paul Germain, who left Klasky Supo in 1993, he stated that the film's writers did not understand what the series was about, and he thought that the scene in which Stu gives a watch to Tommy did not work, as adults were not supposed to be able to recognize the baby's intelligence, and he didn't like that Tommy was given a baby brother because it changed the series from what it intended to be. And I 100% agree with him on all fronts. The stuff with the watch was weird. And it didn't work. Responsitivity or whatever, it just did not work at all. And then the whole thing with Dill was honestly the start of the slide for the show for me personally. Even as a kid, even as the target demographic, when Dill started to become more of a main character and Soucie started to become more of a main character, the show really started to take a dip in quality to me. And especially with Dill, because Dill is just an annoying baby. Like the other babies can be annoying, but like not in the same capacity as Dill. Because Dill is just crying and crying and crying and crying, and that's most of all that Dill does. And this is essentially a Dill movie because even though you have a fun Indiana Jones parody in the beginning, it's just a setup for the birth of Dill because Dee Dee is pregnant with her second baby, Dill, and that's what leads to conflict between Dill and Tommy. That's a large chunk of the script, and that conflict just felt like it was not as well thought out as it could have been and poorly executed to me personally, because Dill just comes across, even for a baby, as just really awful. And then Tommy understandably it reaches a breaking point later on when he and the rest of the babies are stuck in the woods, and Dill is continuing to be a spoiled baby and genuinely abusive towards him, stealing his blankie, doing all this other stuff. And he finally gets fed up and he's about ready to feed Dill to the monkeys and just give up on Dill entirely. And then Dill just has a random change of heart out of nowhere, which doesn't make any sense that this character that was just so abusive and so mean to Tommy is then all of a sudden just going to flip on a dime because Tommy's his older brother. I didn't buy it. It felt very forced and it didn't feel earned when it comes to the shift when it for Dill and his character. And why do we need like a baby that's being mean to Tommy and to the other babies? Why do we need that? We already have Angelica. We don't need Dill to basically be another antagonist. And that led to a problem with Angelica because Angelica felt like she was underutilized in this movie. She's just chasing the babies. There's good portions of the film where she's just relegated to being a part of a montage with her and the dog, Spike. And she's just trying to get Cynthia back. And that's really all that is going on with her. And you think, okay, it's gonna be the Rugrats movie. She's gonna have some dastardly, like, evil plan, and no. Instead, it's Dill and the drama with Dill, and I don't like Dill. I mean, I like dill pickles, but I don't like this Dill. And then you have the stuff with, Stu and Dee Dee, and they are even having problems with the handling Dill themselves. And then that leads to, Stu giving Tommy the watch. And prior to all of that, Tommy's feeling really sad because he thinks that he's being neglected and forgotten about by his parents because they're just focused on Dill so much. And the script admittedly does a good job making you sympathize with Tommy. It does a really bad job making you sympathize with Dill, though. I think it's trying to make you sympathize or connect with both of them, and I can't connect with Dill at all. It's just the character is just written in such a one note, unlikable fashion, and the attempts to try to make him likable are just not believable to me. They don't work. Eventually, the babies they wind up getting in this Reptar wagon that Stu built, and they wind up rolling out the door, and they get lost in the woods. And then there's this subplot with monkeys, which also doesn't work. It just felt random as hell. Like the writers were just thinking, well, it's a kids movie. What kind of things are kids gonna enjoy? Well, how about monkeys? And then they just throw monkeys at the wall and hope that the monkeys stick. And they don't. They're just random as hell. A circus group, a circus train full of monkeys crashes in the woods. The monkeys escape, and then the monkeys are in the woods, and they're just a nuisance towards the babies. And then not only do you have the monkeys, then you have like this wolf that's trying to get the babies too. And so I'm like, okay, what is the antagonist? Is the antagonist Dill? Is the antagonist the monkeys? Is the antagonist the wolf? Is it the antagonist Angelica? You can't have like five different antagonists in this movie. Like, pick one. Is it the wolf? It seems like the wolf is supposed to be pretty fearsome, but definitely a lot more fearsome than the monkeys wind up being. Then give the wolf more to do. Give the wolf more of a character. Or how about give the character of Rex Pester more screen time? I mean, it's after all a character voiced by the legendary Tim Curry. And he's just an annoying reporter who is there for like 2 minutes. Why don't I make him the antagonist in some way? Maybe he teams up with Angelica and helps her with her crazy, wild plan to get rid of the babies. But instead, you got this just mess of a script where the babies are alone in the woods in the Reptar wagon. They are bickering and trying to find a way to coexist with one another, dealing with Dill. Then you have the whole thing where they eventually split off because the babies are upset at Tommy. Tommy's friends, Phil and Lil and Chucky. They're upset at Tommy because Tommy seems to care more about his baby brother than he does his friends. And so they have a spat, and they split off. And then that's when you have the whole thing where Tommy and Dill are staying together in a cave. And then Tommy gets fed up with Dill, tries to feed him to the monkeys, but then he realizes how wrong he is because Dill is showing some affection for him, and then Dill then does a complete 180 as a character. And eventually Tommy apologizes to his friends and they get back together and they team up and they do their part to outsmart the monkeys and then also get away from the wolf. And while the babies are dealing with the stuff in the woods, the adults are dealing with their own troubles. Uh, um, Stu and his brother and grandpa and Dee Dee, they all team up to try to go find the kids. And they run into their own obstacles along the way. Stu is using his inventions to help him find the babies uh, to varying degrees of effectiveness as usual. And you have a lot of scenes with adult characters that are just there for random cameos. Tim Curry is Rex Pester, David Spade and Whoopi Goldberg as these park rangers. Various other characters voiced by different celebrities. An entire musical number with babies who are musicians like Lenny Kravitz and Iggy Pop and Lisa Loeb and Beck, and they're all talking about pooping their diapers. And then you have stuff like where the babies pee in a sink in a whole dance number with all these musicians. Like it's it really does feel like let's just throw shit at the wall and hope it sticks. And it's a kids movie. It's a Rugrats movie, so we don't really have to put that much thought into it. That's really how I feel about this screenplay. It's for the most part kind of lazy and uninspired, and a boring plot. I mean, for all the fantastical adventures that the babies went on throughout the cartoon series, and the movie is mostly them just in the woods. Like, what a waste. What a disappointment. And like I said, I just don't really like the vibe. I don't like the tone. I don't like how genuinely, honestly depressing the film is at points. That's not really the kind of vibe and overall feel that I remember from the Rugrats cartoon. So yeah, I think I do. I think the writers completely misunderstood what Rugrats was. And as much as I give this film credit for having familiarity when it comes to the directors, like why did they not have some familiar voices, some people in the writers' room who had experience writing the show? It seemed like a no-brainer to me, but instead, let's go with these outsiders who clearly don't understand what Rugrats is about. And I know I'm talking about a movie that was a massive hit, but I mean, that doesn't mean anything to me. Just because it was successful financially, that doesn't mean it was a successful film as a whole. Doesn't mean that the script was really good, despite it making all this money. It seemed like it made all this money in spite of itself, to be honest. It made all this money because of the fact that it was the Rugrats movie, not because it was actually a really worthwhile, really good screenplay. Now, the voice cast, they're doing the best that they can. And for the most part, I think the voice cast turns in some pretty good work. E.G. Daily is once again really strong as Tommy Pickles. I've always felt that she did a really nice job with that character. And she did not miss a beat here when it comes to her voiceover work for Tommy in the movie. The same thing goes for the other uh, um, performers, the other regulars from the show. You know, Christine Cavanaugh who voiced Chucky, and Kath Soucie who voiced Phil, Lil, and Betty. Jack Riley who voiced Stu. Cheryl Chase who voiced Angelica. And Melanie Chartoff who voices Dee Dee and Grandma. Um, Michael Bell, who voices Grandpa and Drew and Chaz. Tress McNeil, who voices Charlotte. Joe Alaskey, who voices Grandpa Lou. And even Tara Strong, who is a newcomer as Dill, which apparently was originally going to be voiced by Madonna, which I don't understand that, and I think that would have been really bad. I think that would not have worked at all. And then you have different celebrities who have guest voiceovers. David Spade just basically is just a typical David Spade character in this. Just plays a scaredy cat. Whoopi Goldberg as Margaret. Honestly, one of the more boring, forgettable contributions that I've heard from her when it comes to her career. Like, honestly, the voiceover sounded like it could have been anybody, any other gal that they picked off the street. There was nothing about this voiceover that really stood out in a good way or even a negative way. It just didn't stand out at all. Tim Curry, he was so much fun as Rex Pester. He stole every scene that he was in. He should have been in the movie more. You have Tim Curry in the Rugrats movie, and he's relegated to a short cameo. I mean, come on, man. Like, he's right there. Like, his manic energy, his prior experience voicing animated villains, it would have just been perfect for this movie. Rex Pester should have been pestering everybody, pestering the babies, pestering the adults. Should have been like the biggest pest throughout the entire movie, and the main villain, and it would have been so much better for it. Um, Busta Rhymes apparently voices the Reptar Wagon, which is a crazy bit of trivia. I don't even think the Reptar Wagon says any lines of dialogue, so he just does a lot of sound effects. Um, and then you have the Baby Singers, which are a bunch of songwriters and singers, like Lou Rawls and Patti Smith and Be Real and the B-52s without Keith Strickland. So yeah, the voice overcast pretty decent, uh, but still kind of a little disappointing, especially when you have Tim Curry and you just completely waste him. Like, I mean, come on, man. The editing by John Bryan and Kimberly Retberg, it's not wretched or anything, but it's just very run of the mill. The music by Mark Mothersbaugh, it's it's good. It definitely captures the spirit of the show well, and you can tell that he's having fun with the assignment. And speaking of the music, there are some songs on the soundtrack that absolutely slap. And there's a reason why this soundtrack is still like one of the most memorable things about the movie for a lot of people, because there's some really good songs from the soundtrack. In particular, "Take Me There" by Blackstreet and Mia featuring Mace and Blinky Blink. That is a classic. So, yeah, the Rugrats movie is a film that I definitely do appreciate, despite not being the biggest fan of it, because of the fact that it was the first non-Disney animated film that made over $100 million. So this is like the first non-Disney animated movie that actually made a big dent in the box office and actually showed that, hey, Disney, there's other studios, there are other animated properties and franchises that can actually be competitive with what Disney had to offer. So it really helped break up the monopoly that Disney had at the time. So I think it's a very important part of animated history, animation history, the fact that the Rugrats movie was the first to do that. But it doesn't really mean that the film itself is particularly that memorable to me. Its feat of making all that money in the box office and being a success financially and critically, and being a huge, a big a boon to Nickelodeon as a studio, like, that is something that I find to be rather memorable, but the movie itself, not so much. This is a movie that, as a kid, I watched it once, and didn't wanna ever watch it again, and as an adult, watching it again after all these years, I feel the same way. Like, I don't have any desire to watch this movie, again. And to me, it honestly represents some of the worst elements of Rugrats, the show, uh, and not as many of the elements of the show that actually were good and worthwhile, except for maybe a couple fantasy sequences. So for me, it's very much a below average effort. It's not terrible at best. It's just kind of tolerable to me, but not in a way where it's even a time waster. It's just a film that, at the end of the day, just really wasn't for me. When it comes to the comedy, when it comes to the story in particular was the biggest thing that just didn't really work that well for me when it comes to the Rugrats movie. And the sequel, though, I do remember liking more, and also the Wild Thornberrys crossover film. Maybe one of these days I might revisit those on this channel. But anyway, thanks for watching my review and my thoughts on the Rugrats movie. And as always, I'll see you later. See ya.